grows. We're not just taxpayers, we're partners in building Kenya's future. Now, I urge the KRA and all stakeholders to align activities to Kenya's development goals. Let's build fair and renewable, enabling particular growth sectors like microfinance. We're ready to play our part, not just in compliance, but in sharing insights and fostering the business environment where ambition is rewarded, not penalized. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Julian. Now it is my great honor to invite Honorable Nderitu Muriithi to the stage to give us his keynote address for the day. Please welcome him.
Thank you. Yes, I must get into my pockets. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Now I know generally. I'm not. Yeah, it is working. I'm not very sure why. But any of you who read the Bible? Anybody who, I mean, like Christians and so, even in those times of Jesus Christ, the tax person was always viewed with some suspicion. Viewed with some suspicion. Of course, ladies and gentlemen, because we are in a law firm, I'm sure you know that without tax, there's no state. There is no state that can exist without tax. It's that straightforward. Now, of course, we should go into how is taxation done and go quite deep into it, and I think that's the conversation of the day. But generally, as a sort of foundational principle, there is no state that can exist without tax. Now, I know some people say, oh, but in fact, Julian referred to it, we are borrowing. Many countries around the world are borrowing. And borrowing is another one of those things you have to interpret a bit carefully. Now, borrowing is deferred tax. Even when, I know we meaning Kenya, but African countries and other countries, we come into a lot of criticism about the nature of the borrowing. You know, the nature of the borrowing, the cost of it and so on. But even when we borrow concessional credit from, say, World Bank for 30 years, you still will have to pay it. Now, how will you pay it? So borrowing is a deferred tax. So in the end, it's all about taxes. And everything that goes on in the Republic, the good, the bad, and the ugly, all of it comes from tax. So let me then go, and I you know, thinking, and I learned this a few years ago when I was assistant minister in Kibaki's government. And if you went, you know, sometimes the president would say, oh, you know, so and so come and talk to me. If you went without your technical people, then the president would just send you away. You know, so we learned very quickly that if you're going to brief you, you went with your permanent secretary, because then, you know. So I came with the commissioner for domestic taxes. And as you know, recently we have split domestic taxes into two. Hopefully, Julian will be happier. So large taxpayers and micro and small, because we think we have to spend a lot of effort to innovate around this question of small businesses and how they contribute to the tax. So I will attempt to speak really rapidly, because we want to respect to say a few things and then go to the open discussion. We agree it's be as candid as you can, and you are in a safe space, is what we would like to. Look, I'm not able to convince Wanjao. You are in a safe space, so what you say here will remain here. So I want to talk briefly in the way the topic has been framed, growing business and growing tax or tax revenue. I want to speak to this question of ease of doing business. I want to ask you something about sentiment, and I'll say a couple of words about KRA itself. By the way, now the slide is already there. How do you grow business? Like, let's ask EABL. What drives business growth for you? Yes. Like we are told, I don't know, I mean, we are told that one of your products is called White Cap that seems to drive itself. The market just keeps on. What drives it? The consumer likes the product. In fact, one time I had that if you're not careful, it's like it eats into the space of the other brands. Is that the case? Uh, into the pool. Yeah. What drives business growth for you, for Wall Street? Innovation. Say more. In the legal side of things, what drives your business? What drives growth for you?
Where they know that there is certainty and concept, where they know that there is certainty, where they know that that laws will be interpreted in the way they believe what they read in the law is what is done in practice, and it gives them the confidence to come into a market such as Kenya.
In thinking about investors, I mean, who are they? Where do they come from? Who, in the Kenyan context or in any context, who are investors, Daniel? For example, in the Kenyan context, who are investors? Where are they? What do they look like?
So I think you could say that we often see them coming through two main channels.
Yes.
The first channel is international investors who are looking to make Kenya a hub. Increasingly, Kenya is a hub for East Africa, and what we've seen from that is that big organizations, tech companies like Oracle, like Google, we want to use Kenya as a platform for them to launch into the East African space and increasingly across Africa. The second category is homemade giants. Good example is EAPL. Other example is Equity Bank. Organizations that have grown domestically and then are spreading their wings beyond Kenya.
Okay. So a whole bunch of things in our slide, the same things that you're saying. Innovation that we think, and this is a layman's interpretation of what drives business. So Ajao, don't be so serious on it. But that's what it is. My layman's interpretation of what drives business growth. So innovation, you have spoken to a stable environment, and perhaps because I'm a finance guy, access to finance, and this access to finance issue is it's a composite issue. It's not a straightforward thing. It's not just about a pile of cash. Yeah? It's about whether, in fact, small businesses, mid-sized business, large businesses can access capital and at what cost. And it is quite, as I said, a bit of a. Earlier on, the received wisdom was that, for example, when we improved access to finance, then income would of necessity rise. Shock on us. When we do now the Fin Access survey, we see, financial inclusion at 90%, but welfare measures are, yeah. So it's a bit it's an interesting space. Last year, Kenya got downgraded by rating agencies from B to B minus. The immediate trigger was because, well, the citizens spoke rather emphatically and said they did not want additional tax measures. And so, you know, within the week of that event, the country was downgraded from B to B minus. A couple of days later, the leading corporates like KCB, NCBA, all of you guys were downgraded primarily because of the perception or the view that your dominant market, meaning Kenya, is riskier. And that, of course, immediately brought up your cost of capital. Newer, larger markets. We're still talking about what is driving business growth. And of course, as our colleague from EABL was saying, in Daniel, your own effort in terms of finding new customers and growing your market. But there is what government ought to do. There's what government ought to do to create markets. And I presume things like the tripartite, is that correct, Felix? What is it? Say it properly. Tripartite free trade area. This is SADC, EAC, COMESA. Even better, the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, which is, well, the entire continent. The idea being that bigger, or rather better access to all these other countries, that therefore you have a bigger market, all potential sources of business growth for yourselves. But let's talk about one other, and I want to circle back to that idea, which is one of my favorite, in terms of what governments can do to create the environment for your businesses to grow. And I'll come back to that development corridor idea. You know, for ourselves, KRA, I mean, RISPA and I and all the rest, we are nearly 9,000. How many are we? Yeah, about 9,500 folks. I hope you are not as skeptical as my friend Omoyo. I went to last Friday. I was asked to go and, you know, officiate an award ceremony for journalists. So the sort of media, I mean, the Journalist of the Year award and so on. And so they asked me, well, how did you spend the day? And I had spent the day in Kisumu meeting about 300 of our clients, and we had had lunch with them. So when I say this, we're just looking at where, how, when did we ever hear of the taxman buying anybody lunch? But this isn't actually, well, this is true. We do it regularly, and we hope to convince you the same. How do we see growth as carry? Another taxes, how do we perceive growth? Well, obviously, when the economy is growing, meaning when your businesses are doing better, revenue grows. So that's number one. Number two, of course, is new tax measures. And our colleague spoke to the predictability of it. And I think in the plenary, we'll go deeper into what is the source of this unpredictability. So anyway, new tax measures. Now, last year, of course, you don't need reminding. You know, citizens were quite irritable or irritated and in a very dramatic fashion said no more. So we'll try to do better this year, and I'm sure we'll debate that a little bit in the plenary. Now, it's about what we do as an organization, any tax agency anywhere in the world, so which is tax administration, efficiency in the work that we do. And one of my favorites there is tax-based expansion. That, you know, you want, I mean, the most fair system is where everybody is participating in tax. Let me circle back to this idea. This is one of my favorite ideas. You know, you said, what do governments do? What can they do to create the environment for your business? If you have a spatial mind a little bit like me, you will notice that in Kenya and in East Africa, you know, economic activity is concentrated along the original transport corridor. So like from Mombasa like this through Nairobi across to Malaba. And it is this thing here. That's where all most of the, if you had to say Kenya's GDP, probably 80% of it is along this corridor. So a few years ago, we had we were thinking we were very clever, and we thought, well, why don't we open a new corridor so that we can double the size of Kenya's GDP and their economic activity by doing that. You know this story, isn't it? Yeah, you know this story. You know what is interesting? From here, from Moyale, going like this, to Lamu, only about 70 kilometers are not tarmac. Today, not in the future. I'm talking about today. If you go from Moyale to Isiolo, very nice tarmac there. If you go to Isiolo, up to there, this is Mudagashi. Up to there, it's tarmac. This one, they call then like this, Garissa, Hola. So, although this one is not complete, only about 70 kilometers from Moyale to Lamu Port are not tarmac. But actually, people don't use this corridor. And I want you as business people and leaders and managers in the Republic to think about what is that about? By the way, you know the one that the boss was being mocked about by young people? Yeah? Is this one. From here, going like that, going to here, going like that, like that. That's the one he was being mocked about. You know what is really interesting? You know what is really interesting, Daniel? From here to here, there is actually a contractor working. From here to here, there is a contractor. From here to here, I think there is a contractor around there, a Chinese contractor who says he's a bit afraid of security, so he's not working. So although, the reaction of the citizen was to mock, the reality is that corridor has been going on for some time. And so we'll talk back to that question of sentiment. What drives sentiment? Now, ease of doing business. Ease of doing business. Again, a layman's interpretation. We agree with you, by the way. I know business people, when they see political leaders and technocrats, and I can understand why you must be skeptical about what goes on. But we agree with you that a predictable tax regime is necessary. Now, by the way, as corporates, what do you say about strategy and culture? What's that thing that you corporates say? What happens? Yes, culture eats strategy for breakfast. This is not news to you, I'm sure. You know that we have the national tax policy, an approved policy, approved by Parliament, and that's why we are. Yeah. So that's strategy. The medium-term revenue strategy. When I spoke about this in January, some corporates were looking at me quizzically, like you are hearing it for the first time. Our written and approved strategy is to think medium to longer term. And I'm sure we'll go a bit into this in the deeper engagement. Now, what is the source of variability? The source of variability is the annual finance bill. That's the source of the variability. As we fiddle with it, So this is exempt this year, and it is zero rated the next. And so that's what we are trying to get out of. Now, the other thing to say about that is everybody focuses on the finance bill itself, except the finance bill is an outcome of a 12-month process. And corporates, your PMOs, as individuals, you actually don't, well, I think we could all engage better in the budgeting cycle that results in the finance bill. So this finance bill that is on the table right now, as in every year, the preparation of it began in August last year. And the finance bill for next year that we shall debate, the preparation will start in August. And we don't really engage with it significantly. Now, in August, the Treasury Minister issues a circular to say, okay, let's start. And we start by reviewing what happened in the previous year and then making a forecast what we think the economy is going to do. Then we take up, and it is publicly available, it is subject to public participation, not so many people engage with it. So the budget review and outlook paper is the actual instrument that comes out of it and is adopted by Parliament. Then out of that, we say, what then do we think could be the resource envelope based on those expectations of what will happen with it? So when we say, how much revenue do we think we will, and that results in the budget policy statement. Again, a legal formal instrument made public by around December, adopted by Parliament by the end of February. And when then we have sector reviews or sector working groups, I think they are often called, we are looking at now allocating that resource envelope. Remember, it is an estimated resource envelope. So that now, although we usually engage it, we engage all of us, the professional firms, when the bill comes out, then we have very nice and well-reasoned reactions to it. How I wish the reactions would come at the budget policy statement level, because that's when the expenditure side is farmed up. And you see in the end, well, how are public sector budgets financed? Okay, from tax revenue and from borrowing. And remember, I already told you, borrowing is a deferred tax. So in the end, it's from tax revenue. So how I wish, for example, as professional services firms, we would engage firstly with the budget review and outlook to say, look, you are estimating this economy is going to go at 6.2%. Maybe it's too optimistic, too pessimistic. Then the resource envelope in the budget review and outlook paper, so that by the time we are coming to the actual finance bill measures, which is generally where all the focus is put, it's already actually a bit late in the day, particularly if you want to influence. Regulations and licenses. And our colleague again spoke to this question. One of the criticisms, of course, in our republic is that because of these two levels of government, county and national, that then there is a multiplicity of agencies and so on. And that's okay. I suppose it's a deserving criticism, albeit that most nations, in fact, have three levels of government. If you look at the US, for example, you have federal government, you have state, and you also have local. The question is, how do we ensure that there is sanity? In Kisumu on Friday, stakeholders asked me, well, look, don't you think there's a bit of duplication between Kentrade and customs? Yeah. And perhaps there is. So there's always opportunity to make something better. A couple of ideas for you to ponder. A couple of ideas for you to ponder. About this question of ease of doing business and the role of the state, how governments go about doing it, and whether they succeed, and do they make it easier or harder for businesses to thrive. And I thought, what can I say that is useful? and we are in a legal firm. And I came across an act from 1651 that is called Navigation Act. And I really would encourage lawyers and business persons, because it's available on the internet, to have a look at it. And you will see that over all these centuries, the behavior of government and how they go about trying to create markets. And you can come all the way to what happened, or what is happening now with the US and China and other global powers. That clearly, most nations started off by protecting or trying to protect their markets, or create markets and then protect them. Over time, as these nations grew, then it became quite convenient, isn't it, to say to the other guy that, look, free trade is better. Open your market for me and I'll open mine for you. But even as countries are doing that, we still have a card under the table, and so we talk about non-tariff barriers. And you will see that, like China, for example, China did not agree to WTO until they were a production powerhouse. And then once they achieved that status, then they could say, let's open up our borders. Free trade is a good thing. So, for example, like when I was growing up professionally, just in the early 2000s, the mantra was free trade. That's what, and even that continues to be. But you can see, like for countries like the US, they are finding that they may have to do it differently. That free trade hasn't necessarily delivered what we promised that it would. So a very large tapestry to say, we agree, government must make it easier for business to thrive. Part of making it easier for business to thrive is not really just in a direct fashion, the way it may appear at face value. And I want to give you two examples and then try and conclude. Example number one is preferences. Governments always create preferences. Now, back 20, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, maybe, after China was succeeding in Guangzhou and that whole neighborhood, it became very fashionable to say, look, create enclaves, create export processing zones, where then you could give preferences to companies. So that you're making it, again, ease of doing business, you're improving. So Kenya, like many other countries, we did so. Except that, if you look at this law, the preferences are given to foreign manufactured machines and equipment. And that's still where we are today. So today, if you open a factory in the EPZ or in a special economic zone, and you want to import a motor from wherever, Brazil, it doesn't attract taxation, but there you go to industrial area and buy a motor, it has tax in it, which basically means these preferences work against heavy manufacturing in the Republic. By the way, I have to be a bit careful here. Who can tell me the meaning of this thing? Homologation, what is it? Who knows the meaning of that word? Let me ask Mary here. Homologation, man. We know Mary is a senior. Mary says, don't ask her. Felix, what is homologation? Who can tell me what is homologation? Come on, guys. Are we together? Homologation, what is it? Nobody wants to venture. Yes, sir. It is an English word. I when it is homologation, Andrew. Okay, go with it. Go with it, Andrew.
The process by which an official authority grants approval certifying that a product, maybe even a vehicle, meets specific standards and regulations for use in a particular country. Is that correct?
That is correct. Now, that's why I say better be careful here. You've heard of this company, Mobius. Yeah? One of the real serious issues why they have struggled is because of that word. Some other young men, and one of them is here from Laikipia, they tried to make tuk-tuk. This noisy, they are very nice things. They can move you from here to there. And in some parts of the country, like Kisumu and Mombasa, they are mainly made in Asia. So these guys tried to make their own tuk-tuk in Nyahururu. And they could not do it because of this word. Now, look, I'm not trying to be nasty. All I'm trying to say to you guys, yes to international best practice, but you must understand what it is that we do as governments. 500 years ago, England and Holland were going to war about these navigation acts. So it's no longer plausible to do it in that fashion. The way we do it today is through standards. So homologation is Kenya Standard 2717. But those countries that have actually made progress, many of them have done it by disregarding this standard. Because what this standard does is require that your nascent manufacturer competes with established manufacturers of 200 years. How will that happen? So when these young men were trying to make their tuk-tuk, what homologation is saying, compete with Mercedes or Lamborghini. That's what it means. Because it says the idea that what is certified by the Kenya Bureau of Standards should be able to attain the same certification in the UK or in New York. And these young men were saying, look, the tuk-tuk, we don't even want it to work in Nairobi. We want it to move our potatoes from here to there in the village. But actually, this is how countries, many countries have had to do. So I agree, international best practice, but we must be careful because what some countries are finding is that by following that mantra, you can specialize in being poor. Yeah, I better move on. This issue of two levels of government, counties, are they a weight? Are they an opportunity? By the way, what do you think? They are a weight. Daniel says they are a weight. Yes, anybody else? Eric, what do you think? Counties, are they an opportunity? Are they a weight? Okay? And I promise you, I have only 2 more slides and we're going to the good stuff. You know, it is very often about perspective. It's really very often about perspective. As young fellows, not so long ago, we were taught that urbanization was a big problem. That's what we were taught. That urbanization is a very big problem across all these developing countries, rapid and so on. And they will lead to slums and things of this kind. Except really solve business people like Dangote and Defki. They saw it differently. They saw it as an opportunity. Because what does housing require? It requires steel, it requires cement. So our counties await or an opportunity. I want to persuade you that they are an opportunity. Now, when I was thinking about this slide, I was a bit nervous because, well, anyway, I'm biased because I was a governor. I think that's the best way you can look at it. What is this slide trying to say to you? And I know Felix was in Djibouti a few days ago, but this is Djibouti here, $4 billion economy. This is Nakuru here, $6.3 billion economy. It's okay for Felix to go to Djibouti. I mean, I think it's fair. But even as he's going to Djibouti, I think he should also go to Nakuru. This is Kendu here, $6.1 billion economy. This is Djibouti. This is Burundi. So even as Felix is going to promote trade, and he is. Okay, well, look, I can pick on him because he's my friend. Can I pick on him? Yes, thank you. So I just want you to have perspective about what this thing means. That although counties may be one way to see them is that they are awake and they are a bit of a, this is what they, and I just picked a few from my neck of the woods. $27 billion. These mountain people, Daniel, you know, they are all the vogue in, in political. $27 billion. Actually, that economy is larger than 37 African countries, including some of the ones that are investment grade. The guys in investments, who is in investments? No? In Africa, only Mauritius and Botswana have a credit rating of investment grade. What that means is that you corporates, EABL, Equity Bank, Safaricom, you can't get AAA rating because the sovereign risk is judged as less than investment grade. You tell me. I mean, this is Mauritius, 14.6 billion. This is where is the date? Oh, here it is, 2023. $14.6 billion. These mountain people who are 27 billion. Again, I don't say it to pretend that everything is honky-dory. I'm just saying, let's keep perspective. Some of them are growing in very interesting speed. Look at Marsabit. Remember that? Roy and Daniel was laughing when I was showing how the road is going. Marsabit, a 5-year, period, has been growing at 9.3%. Real GDP growth. You can see Wanjao is wondering, should he move to Marsabit? It means as a corporate, you need to begin looking at, look at Nakuru, 6.9%. And, yeah, so quite significant and growing very, very rapidly. Look at Kajiado, 6.3% new GDP growth and at a very good pace. What drives sentiment? Second last slide. You know, and I know you corporates, sometimes and I understand it. I know sometimes when you look at technocrats, you look at these guys in the political side, you wonder, do they know what they are talking about? Do they even know what is data? But we do track PMI, and PMI asks you managers what you are thinking. And it is, you can see for many months it has remained a bit muted. What is driving that sentiment? Is it what the media likes to say? Macroeconomic variables, I don't know what they are. But I assume it is inflation and interest rate and so on. What drives sentiment actually? For you to ponder. Is it political communication? Is it this question of public trust? And I don't have answers for you. I'm just saying ponder it. The reason being, if you are to objectively look at inflation, inflation is low in Kenya today. I'm not saying it hasn't been high. It is low today. If you are to objectively look at data, the exchange rate has remained stable for some time. If you are to objectively look at data, lending rates are going down. Heaven knows not at the speed we want as policymakers, but nonetheless they are trending downwards. But business confidence is in a different quadrant altogether. Consumer confidence is in a different quadrant altogether, as though these variables do not matter. And it raises the question, how do you then do modern economic management? I want to ask Rispa to say a few words, and I know we've eaten into the time for discussion. You have all your clients and yourselves, you have taken advantage of the tax amnesty. Sindio? Yes or no? Yes. Yes. And if you have a client, if you have a neighbor, if you yourselves, you still have a few days left in case you haven't. Tax amnesty is a very straightforward point. If you fell behind before, then there are penalties and interest. But the law allows us up to June 30th to remove those penalties and interest. Please, please, take advantage of it. Now, I know in Kisumu, some people took me aside and saying, okay, can you extend it? Well, look, it's not really up to me or ISPA. I mean, this matter would have to go to Parliament, but I doubt that we can persuade them again. Take advantage up to June 30th. We, in spite of, and sometimes I wonder if you fear us because of the lion in our logo. You know this, there it is. I wonder if this is, I have been considering maybe if we change it because, you know, we don't want you to fear us. And here is how we view you as our clients. We know that tax compliance is it's a bit like a pyramid or a triangle. Let me use a triangle. By far the vast majority of taxpayers, they pay voluntarily. They actually pay voluntarily. Another smaller layer of 15, who knows, 20%, their non-compliance is inadvertent. I mean, they did not set out actually not to comply. It's inadvertent. Either something has happened, we've changed something, they didn't know, you know, it's inadvertent. The next layer is taxpayers who may need the occasional reminder, the occasional nudge. And on the top there, a very small proportion, less than 2-3% of taxpayers who, you know, I won't pay. You know, catch me if you can. So obviously, as an organization, we, knowing that, we know that our responsibility, surely, or part of our responsibility, is to simplify, so that we make it easy for clients to fulfill their responsibility. Part of our responsibility is to create universality. That's this idea of tax-based expansion, so that every Kenyan is a participant in this process, and the rate applicable to any particular person is therefore less. We know, therefore, our responsibility is to leverage on technology. And Rispa will go a little bit into what we're doing with technology. Albeit you can see a couple there, like e-teams, and she will explain. I know when we started e-teams, some people were saying, no, it's too much. Yet it is a ledger that we maintain on your behalf, which really makes it very straightforward to do it. We know it's part of our responsibility to make it easier for you to integrate, including for digital. Where's digital? Here he is. To integrate and to create, help your clients to integrate. That's why we have that API to assist. We know these things. Of course, when we do, sometimes some people will write some interesting things that taxman is snooping. No, we are not snooping. We are interested in, we are creating a platform for companies and all tax to be able to integrate with our systems. And as I told you, we have recently created a new department within the context of domestic taxes so that we can have better focus, particularly on the small side. What is our ambition? What I already told you. We want to move from being a feared tax collector to a trusted service organization. Asanteni sana. Rispa, karibu.
Thank you, Chairman. I think this will do. Good morning, everyone. Let me start by saying we come in peace. And I think, as you've said, I've noted my chairman, it's good he has pitched it there. My work is very simple. So, and I'll start on something that he said, and this is something I really like. That bit where he divided that pyramid, that triangle. Why do I like that? Because more often than not, when people see the tax man or woman, they see problems. Now, when the chairman talks about changing that logo, it just means even if it became a cub, chairman, or a kitten, the work to be done, we call ourselves a necessary evil, as he has actually set out. Collection of taxes is just inevitable. As we said, two things in life, yeah? Death and taxes. So we come in peace, and we believe that we are now talking amongst friends. Now, every market, sometimes when it's said in Kiswahili, it even sounds better. Every market has its madman. Let me say it in Kiswahili. Kila soko lina mwenda wazimu wake. Kila soko lina wazimu wake. What do I mean? That even, just generally, loosely speaking, even in the family setup, because you know when you see KRA, you see problems, you see people who attach accounts, you see people who clamp you down, you see people who are there to harass and bring your business down, but far from it. Now, I got the sense that when Julian was talking, I got the sense that maybe that might not have been your original speech. I don't know whether I'm right, and I'm not asking, it's rhetorical. It kind of switched, and like the tax, and it was a good one because we picked certain things. And for us, in such an environment, it's about picking feedback. Because I think what I picked from you is facilitation, engagement. Let us focus on what it is that we need to do to grow your business, because as we grow your business, it means then revenue is growing. And that actually speaks to the theme of the day, growing business and tax revenue simultaneously. In the morning, it was Tuku, I said, we are shareholders in your business, and you said no. Initially. And I convinced him why. I'm not sure whether I even took like a second or two. But basically, being shareholders in your business means when you thrive, we thrive. When your business grows, when I see, especially like those ones who publish accounts and financials, when I see numbers go up, I smile. And sometimes I take pictures and I send to my people like, have you seen this one? Yeah? These are our good friends, right? No, by the way. No, si kwa ubaya. I thought I said we come in peace. No, it's like now that day I know, even when I appear in the board before chairman, I rock in with a bounce. You know, like I know even with the chairman asking me a question today, I know I'm okay. Yeah? And once in a while, you know, it's important I call you, how are you doing? Is all well. Na si kwa ubaya. Like I said, we come in peace. So as we are doing this, you know, some of you, inevitably, you have to publish financials, correct? And even when you're marketing yourselves, by the way, it is a good thing. In the same manner, remember, apart from being a tax collector, I mean, you're speaking to a bigger audience. It's not just about the tax man or woman. So you're speaking to a bigger audience. And that should not deter, even for those of you who are not on the stock exchange. So very briefly, and as chairman said, what are we doing as KRA? Going back to that bit where he described the tax compliance, I call it, I think I've spoken about it so many times, so I've decided to name it the compliance pyramid. And I divide it into three. If you think about a triangle, just like the chairman said, triangle, split into three. The bottom layer is wider. From the tax man's view or lens, that wide base, most of us are there. Happy to comply, willing to comply. Whether you just want to comply so that's for peace to reign, or whether you want to comply because it is a civic duty, but most of us are in that category. Then go to the middle one. Yeah? I could slacken a bit, but if with a little nudge from KRA, a little reminder, happy to comply. But that top bit, and I liked actually the words that he used, can't pay, won't pay, catch me if you can. But I'll tell you, the reason why sometimes some of these emotions speak is because that small tip, the ones I'm saying can't pay, won't pay, catch me if you can, you'll be surprised. There are very few, but they are the loudest. They are the loudest, and they would have this thing of, this is what these guys are doing. This is what KRA is doing. This is what KRA, and of course, because it is tax, everyone catches on. And sometimes you actually have this engagement, say, bring us statistics. Tell me, what is the problem? What is happening in your space? And sometimes the statistics don't come. Not to say that they don't come at all. Sometimes they actually do. And you know, as they say, a wise person changes their mind. We have tried taxes. We have tried implementing certain taxes, and they didn't work. Now, going back to the earlier point of, as a taxpayer, at what point do you engage with this legislation? Do you wait until the finance bill is published? And then we all start running around in the name of public participation and giving comments. Over breakfast, as I was talking to some of us, I said, you know, from my experience, little or much experience, whatever it is, you know, sometimes when we see these provisions in the law, we always come to the table saying this won't work. This is my view. And this is what I have proposed before. When you come to the table, whether you're talking to KRA or, let me put it this way, when you're talking about to Treasury or to Parliament making your submissions, when you bring a proposal or when you're telling government, let me say government, that this won't work, one, I always advise, don't talk as X. I am company X and I'm thinking this won't work. It helps when you're talking as an industry. And when you come to the table, say, this won't work because of 1, 2, 3, 4, but why don't you try this other route? It might not bring the immediate revenue, but in the long run, this is what will happen. Short, medium term, long term. But more often than not, our reaction is always, this won't work, do away. This won't work. And of course, we do papers upon papers and publications upon publication. Now, back closer home and reading from this, Chairman has talked about the tax amnesty. Please take advantage of the amnesty. More often than not, you know, we're told as tax people, we don't give out often. I think we are known for taking, right? But this one, that's why we are proudly talking about it. I know in the first instance, it ran for 9 months. This one is running for about 6 months, 6 and a couple of days. But being who we are timing June. And even when we do our projections, we look at June. But now that is the time when reality hits us and everyone starts running. And then the thing will be, KRA is not responsive. Please take advantage. It's not too late. Whereas this is a second bite at it, there is no guarantee that the amnesty will be back. More importantly, the likes of the partners like IMF have actually discouraged this, completely discouraged the tax amnesty. So, and remember, the provision on waivers of penalties and interest was repealed. So it does not exist. So if you say, I'm not going to take advantage of the amnesty, you have no opportunity to waive your penalties and interest. So really, this is the time. And even with the existing provisions of the waiver of penalties and interest, you had to give justification. And a very long story as to why, probably through that, Daniel would tell you, you have to have a very long story as to why you think you qualify. But with the amnesty, you don't have to, as long as you fall within, you meet the criteria. Tax dispute resolution, I cannot belabor this. Please take advantage of that opportunity. We do ADR, alternative dispute resolution. That is another angle. And in engaging in that alternative dispute resolution framework, again, it will facilitate you with the tax amnesty. Please remember, after 30th of June, this chapter closes. And as the chairman said, there is no, as in we cannot guarantee that it will come back, but it is a process that has been discouraged. Now, let's file our returns by 30th of June. This is the December year ends. This is the individuals. I know, as we encourage each other. Why am I talking to this? Again, when you're talking about growing business as tax revenue simultaneously, doing what is expected to be done at the right time also does away with the headache. I am not saying it is perfect. But as we are doing this, we are engaging taxpayers. We are introducing systems. ETIMS. I think by now, is there anyone who doesn't know about ETIMS? No. I know ETIMS has its own challenges, like every other system. But that is why we are here. What can we do differently? We're in that space where, as KRA, apart from sitting in our corner and creating something and throwing in the market, we are actually going big now on co-creation. As we are rolling out certain systems, we test them. We test them with a few. If it works, it works. And it might not work for everybody because all systems are not the same. IRITS, this was launched 2 weeks ago. This is still also voluntary in the rental income space, where as it is now, we are aware of the monthly rental income, simplified tax, we moved from 10% to 7.5. The hope was, as you're reducing the taxes, then obviously you'll expand the tax base. And we know, as we expand the tax base, it means then we are bringing equity, hopefully. And then it means that there is less of a burden on those already paying. Because right now, gone are the days where it was easier to find that taxpayer who was in a brick and mortar. You know, right now, they are where you have to really look. Again, I remember in our days back then, even when it came to filing and paying of taxes, you needed to run to Times Tower and make sure you cross those doors before 5 p.m. And you stay in. Sometimes even you'd send a clerk and say, stay in there until all the taxpayers have paid. Right now, it is in the comfort of your home. So there's a lot that is being done in that simplification. To simplify taxes, to make compliance easier, trying to give back where we can. We know there are areas that are still a challenge, but I think even as we are engaging here, the important thing is first to set the tone and listen to you. What can we do differently? And also, for us, even as you're seeing the glass as half full, we also appreciate that there are things that need to be done. And as I close, just going back to the comment that you made, Julian, as you started, you said, KRA deviates from its own charter. Instead of implementing the law, it reinterprets it. Just a reminder that wherever there is any business transaction, the possibility of interpreting something different, because it's the same law, but we will always interpret it differently, whether you call it tax planning, tax, whatever word. But I think that is why we are here, to keep talking, to keep engaging. Thank you very much, and we can talk later more.
Thank you guys so much. We really appreciate it. Now, in continuing, we have a quick fireside chat. I'd like to invite Daniel from ALN and Kane from Digitax up to the stage to tell us what Digitax is doing.
All right. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's always very difficult to come after the chairman of the KRA and the Commissioner of Domestic Tax. But we will try and make this very quick and short. There are a number of interesting themes that have come through this morning. We heard about the drive for domestic resource mobilization. We've talked about the digitization. And we've also talked about how you reach the bottom of the pyramid to expand the tax base. What we want to do with the Digitax for a few minutes is just talk about what they are doing in terms of digitization of tax. And then after that, we are going to have a roundtable, which I know is eagerly anticipated by everyone who is in the room, when we will have a more broader conversation. So very welcome, Kane. Maybe you can tell us about Digitax and what Digitax is all about.
Great, thank you, and good morning. Good morning, everyone. So Digitax is a tax software platform. So we work very closely with tax authorities across the continent in their mandate around using technology to collect taxes, especially around domestic resource mobilization. So we're currently active in a few markets. And I think to your point and question around, resource mobilization, how this works across all sectors of the economy. We found a few interesting things. So first, it's important to recognize the role we play. So we are like a middleware or an interface between the tax authority and businesses and their various systems and technologies, because the whole idea is to transmit this information in real time. So as you raise an invoice or as you make a sale, the tax authority would like that visibility. And now we provide the tools and the capability from a software standpoint to make that possible. Now, the interplay between large taxpayers and medium, small, and micro taxpayers, and even individuals and the informal sector has been very interesting. If many of you remember, when eTIMS first rolled out, there was a famous case of avocado farmers and how they'll comply with eTIMS. And that came from a point of, because it was starting out, there was still a lot of learning and understanding around how to streamline this whole process for all the players. So I think the role the likes of Digitax and technology players can do is build and innovate around the capability that has been provided by tax authorities, KRA being one of them, and basically build solutions for the market so that even as the government thinks about expanding the tax base, there are solutions that cater to all sectors of the economy. So for the large taxpayers, it's normally very easy and straightforward because they're used to compliance and they have systems. But of course, the lower you go in terms of the size of business, for them, a lot of this is new. And what they want is simplified and straightforward solutions. So the way we see it is the more we continue to innovate around the solutions that have been provided. The chairman talked about APIs. For us, we always advocate for as many functions or services as possible to be availed through APIs. Why? Because once you avail it, then you can really build and innovate. When you think about a taxpayer's journey, eTIMS is just but one step. Why? Because eTIMS is just transmitting the information. But the tax journey is only complete when you think about filing, preparing, and paying. So today, a taxpayer has to go through various systems to complete their tax journey. But to the extent that, all this can be availed in terms of it, I think that will then, with time, meet the goals of expanding and enhancing the tax base.
So maybe just for the benefit of everyone in the room, when you say you're a middleware, can you explain that a little more? How do you sit in between KRA and the taxpayers?
Okay, so best way to explain it is through eTIMS. So as the commissioner asked, I believe we're all familiar with eTIMS. So eTIMS is a tool that allows transmission of tax information in real time. Now, when you think about it from a business perspective, there are various systems and solutions that they use to generate their tax solutions. And all these systems were built and set up before eTIMS. So with this new requirement, all the system needs a way to efficiently transmit this information to eTIMS. So as Digitax, we come and look at your system, we look at your business, we also look at your processes, because it's important to understand eTIMS, yes, is a technology, but it also needs to tie into your process and how you basically trade with your customers and your suppliers. So we then now simplify that whole interface where we are saying we'll understand your system and your processes. We'll also then ensure that the requirements and conditions set out by KRA in terms of using eTIMS are met. And then our software does that whole transmission of that information. So we look at compliance and validation on your end, and then you make sure what is sent to KRA side meets the standards or the requirements of eTIMS and the laws and policies around it.
So just, some of the challenges that digitization brings. There's been a lot of talk, in essence, about the lowest end of the market and access to digital platforms, whether that is a possibility, is it realistic? There's been some issues around the thresholds. Is it a 5 million threshold? Is it not a 5 million threshold? What is your sense? Because there's an argument that the Revenue Authority often looks at the same group of taxpayers, does not do enough to look at the taxpayers who are either on the lower end, the people in the informal sector. Or what's your sense in terms of what you've been doing, the challenges and the opportunities that this drive for digitization can bring?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think rightly so, a tax authority has to look at this in terms of how do we ensure that we do two things. One, we don't risk the process or the system of tax collection. Yeah. Because you can bring in a new technology and it collapses the ability to collect and mobilize taxes. That's the first thing. But the second thing is in expanding the tax base, how do you make it as straightforward and as easy as possible for all the intended taxpayers to participate in their role in terms of tax collection, or rather transmitting this information for purposes of tax collection. Now, it comes back to my previous point. I believe if we think about it from an innovation standpoint, where we say, these are the solutions, these are the requirements, please go out and innovate and think through how this works for every taxpayer, I think we'll get there. To your point around the thresholds, the intention originally, in my belief, was in an effort to expand the tax base, e-Teams was brought in to cover all sectors of the economy, including individual taxpayers. And that was informed even in some of the laws that came up. And then there were the tax amendment laws towards the end of last year that then increased the threshold. Now, there are two ways of looking at it. One, this was because maybe perhaps businesses or the government felt it was a bit difficult to get people to be on e-Teams, especially if you're trading small amounts. But then on the other hand, there's also a way to think of it where if we have like very strong building blocks, and we have ways and mechanisms to ensure that people are comfortable with even the act of paying tax. Today, I think on average, the taxpayer has to probably interact with 2 or 3 systems to be able to complete their tax journey. Yeah. So there's e-Teams for transactions, then there's iTax for filing, preparation, and then you need to go to another system, probably eCitizen or your bank to pay. So to the extent this can be unified, or taxpayers feel this journey is not difficult for me, I think then there's a case to be made that we can actually encourage more people to participate in tax mobilization. So those are some of the things we've seen so far. And this is also playing out in other markets. But it's a journey. e-Teams, in as much as sometimes it gets a lot of luck, is only 2 years in. So a lot has been achieved, a lot has been learned. And I think from a technology standpoint, I think there's a lot more that would be able to do as a country. So I would say we're just scratching the surface. Early days, lots of learnings. There'll be back and forth in various respects. But I think eventually we'll get where we need to be.
Thank you, Kane. I know we're running short of time, and we want to go into the plenary session. So I'm going to ask you the last question. It does sound that you're a digital taxation advocate, and I know that you're planning to launch into new markets. Maybe you can tell us about what you're doing on the African continent, where you're going, and the sort of key learnings that we as a country could probably learn from your experience within the region.
Sure. So at present we are in Kenya, Zambia, and we're about to just start in Nigeria. So the good thing actually is a lot of governments are keen to learn from the Kenyan experience, and they're looking at it from 3 standpoints. So the first one is what has happened from a policy and law and legal standpoint, because the one thing maybe people don't realize but happens subconsciously is e-Teams is a self-enforcing mechanism. Why? Because for me to claim, the way the law is structured is for you to claim a tax deductible expense, there must be a tax invoice. So businesses don't want to run afoul of that requirement, and you find that the ones proactively asking for e-Teams invoice as part of a payment. So from a law or legal design standpoint, that was a very key thing to encourage people to actually self-regulate around e-Teams. From a technology standpoint, actually many other governments are trying to copy Kenya to the extent some have actually taken what eTeams does, like for like, and have deployed it in their markets. So the many markets we look at, and when we look at the system we need to interface with, it's basically eTeams with the branding of that government system and their local taxes. So there's a lot to be said for people actually building on what's happening from a technology standpoint. And then the third thing also, maybe zooming a bit out, is the fact that Kenya's technology system, at least from a government standpoint, is fairly well integrated. So right now on eCitizen, you can actually do quite a lot, including using eTeams. You can use eTeams on eCitizen. Now, many governments don't have that interconnectedness, and you find that many different systems are not talking to each other, and they're looking to learn from the Kenyan experience. So in summary, I would say a lot of governments are looking to what Kenya is doing. They're also thinking around how does this work in their context, because of course eventually they'd like to capture as many taxpayers, but there are mainly other legal, political, economic scenarios to think about. But from what we are seeing so far, we feel in the next 2 to 3 years, majority of African governments will have an eTeams equivalent. As we speak, there are 33 countries in Africa that have an e-invoicing mandate. 19 are mandatory, 14 are voluntary, but the way things are trending, we see tax technology being a core part of governments and tax authorities' core strategy in the next 2 to 3 years. So, lot to look forward to in the next coming months and years.
Thank you very much, Kane. Thank you very much. I think he deserves a clap of applause. So we can head back there for the next session, which I think, Andrew, you and I are coordinating.
Yes, me and you are moderating the next session, but I have some ground rules to set first. So how many of you are familiar with the Chatham House rules framework for events? All right, 3 people, 4, 5. All right, so let me explain it for you. First off, I would like to ask Frontlight Media to turn your cameras off. So for a Chatham House roundtable, we will not be streaming this roundtable discussion. This is closed here in the room, okay? When you leave the room, you can discuss what was talked about, but you cannot specifically label individual people and say, Andrew said this, to the chairman. That's essentially the breakdown of the rules. So please, no recording, no cameras and such, and the contents of this discussion remain within this room. So how we're going to run this is that if you have something you would like to state, please keep it brief to a minute, minute and a half. We will bring the microphone around to you. We'll likely take Daniel, what do you think? We take like 2 questions at a time and then a response. Yeah, so we'll take 2 questions at a time and then a response. If you are directing your question to anyone in particular, please make sure to establish that. Did I cover everything?
Yep. Maybe if you allow, Andrew, I can sort of frame the first sort of discussion and people can then jump in. So I think we had quite a lot from 4G Capital, and a lot of interesting things came out from there. There were issues that came out with respect to the tax environment, the cost of compliance,